if you know that your particular idea is about a particular genre, so naturally there will be some sort of a character or a protagonist in your concept about which you are going to tell the story. So ultimately it's a human mind, it's a human being, it's a human character who is a protagonist, and about that particular human being you are going to tell the story in your entire screenplay. So if you know what is your concept, so concept is what? It's a well defined idea. So again I'm trying to tell you about the development of the protagonist and the development of antagonist. So all of a sudden you cannot be a good person, or all of a sudden your character cannot be a bad person. So how you will make it the believable situations about your characters? So it's about the central conflict of your story. So once you have defined who is your protagonist and what happens to the protagonist, and ultimately what is the goal of the protagonist. So in a simple way, if the boy is poor and the girl is rich, and that boy wants to meet the girl, or both of them want to get married, so if this is a goal, so ultimately even though people can guess that at the end of the story they will meet each other and they will have a marriage, but still it's the responsibility of the protagonist or the responsibility of the story writer that the journey of this girl and boy should be very, very interesting. It should not be predictable. So it's about the characterization of your film. These characters are central characters. So protagonist, the hero or heroine of your film, the profession of that profession of that antagonist or a protagonist, and the central conflicts is what that antagonist kills the father of protagonist, or antagonist creates some property dispute in the family of protagonist, or antagonist kidnaps some person from the house of protagonist, or antagonists want to create some terrorism in the particular country or particular region or in the particular culture. See, try to understand the value of the conflict should be very high. How your goal will define, that goal belongs to the hero, so the goal will have very high value, and high value depends on what kind of a conflict you are going to portray in the film. So how to define your central conflict? And for these things you need to understand what kind of similarities about your conflicts are already there in the different films. Or also you can find out that what kind of similar conflicts are there in the society or in the particular region or in the particular countries. So if you know that the central conflict is a very common, but the way of creation of the conflict is a very unique. So ultimately, do not try to show the audience that already audience knows about that. So simple story should be visible in a very different way. So it's about now to understand what is the definition of the story. What we have understood that from the thought or from the idea we have to convert that idea into the concept. That concept will be very well defined idea. So in that well defined concept, their geographical, cultural, aesthetical values will be there with a particular parameters of that particular society or the country or the region. So basic human emotions, that is the love and hatred, these are the common emotions throughout the world, throughout the universe. So if you know that your story takes place in South Africa as well as North America, so ultimately it's about your creative exploration and your creative ability and your intellectual capacity to define the goal of the story. Because stories are about the explanation, the stories are about the explanation of the heroism of a particular protagonist or a particular hero or a particular heroine. But unless you are not telling you the central conflict in a very interesting way, the journey of protagonist will not be visible in the front of audience. So ultimately, story is about the heroism of a particular character, particular person, and the particular person should have his or her journey with a different visual experiences. So when we are trying to define the story, so story is basically the journey of your protagonist in particular time and space. And throughout the universe, throughout the world, there are n numbers of boundaries and the situations and activities continuously happening, and since the ages. But when you are trying to define your story, it means you will have to focus on a particular space and time. So when I say particular time and space, it means the story takes place in 1937 to 1938 at Uganda or Jerusalem or Africa or India or Indonesia or Japan, and it's the story of a Buddhist monk who gets married with a widow. So it's an example. So if you know that a Buddhist monk is going to get married, it means what can be the critical situation in which he is going to get married with a widow. So is it challenging? So initially, socially, it's a not acceptable concept. But then there is a story when there is some challenging content is there. So is it a love story, or is it a critical situation, or is it a realistic story, or is it a fiction? So story, the phase of the story is just a span of a one day or a 1 year or 100 years or 1,000 years. You need to define. So what is a central event in the story, and what are the consequences of the story before the particular incidents happen and post incident of the story? So you need to understand, or you need to understand that what is a plot of your story. So you know the plot, then you must know what is the value of the plot and what can be created on that particular plot. You cannot compile so many ideas in a single plot unless it is not defined. You need to understand that the central event or the central conflict of the story should be well defined.